Welcome to Point Blank, brought to you by Fitz Roofing. I'm Brandon Strahm to Sports Map Houston. He's Joel Blank of ESPN 97.5 and 92.5's The Killer Bees, which you can listen to weekdays noon to 3 or anytime on podcast. Joel, welcome in. Ahead of the trade deadline, the Astros traded away Miles Straw to relieve a logjam in the outfield. Fast forward to just a few weeks later, 6, I think, the logjam may be worse now than it was then, because the guy who was vying for that time in the outfield, and just Chas McCormick, has seemingly now been edged out by Jake Meyers. And so you've got Kyle Tucker and Wright who's producing. You got Jake Meyers. You got Chas McCormick on his heels. Now Jose Siri has emerged as a guy who looks like maybe he deserves some playing time. And that's not to mention two other guys who are spending time in the outfield out there in Yordan Alvarez and Michael Brantley. So what I want to know is, obviously Brantley's not going to be a long-term fixture out in the outfield, and you hope that maybe given Yordan's legs and knees, maybe he's not a long-term fixture in the outfield. So let me ask you this. What does the future of the Astros outfield look like for you?
It looks very bright. If you have Siri and you have Tucker and you have Myers in the outfield, you could do a lot worse. Now, you may at a certain point want to add a veteran that gives you a little bit more power in the lineup. It's possible, but at least the future looks brighter than you might have thought when all these different services were and experts were saying the depleted Astros farm system was going to be a problem going forward. Jake Meyers, look, he came on the scene early, and Dusty put him some in really uncomfortable, tough positions against great pitchers, coming off the bench cold, and he didn't do well. But when he started to get his feet wet, get comfortable, and play consistently, he showed you he has pop. He's in that George Springer mold in terms of the outfield, the center fielder that the Astros like, as opposed to a slap-hitting, speedy leadoff hitter that most teams think about when they think about center field. Siri still has a lot to prove, but the upside looks so good because he's got pop, he's got speed, he's got a ticker that looks like he's on go at all times. He's a guy that fits right into what James Click looks like he wants from that Rays perspective he came from in Tampa, of getting that kind of outfielder alongside Myers. And then, of course, Tucker, if he just continues to be Kyle Tucker, the numbers speak for themselves. Those are your three outfielders for the future. And honestly, in my opinion, substituting Brantley for Siri, that's your outfield right now for the playoffs for the Houston Astros. You should have Michael Brantley. You should have every day, whether righty or lefty, Jake Meyers, and you should have Kyle Tucker in your outfield, and Yordan Alvarez as your designated hitter.
So in your opinion, Siri has already supplanted McCormick in the pecking order?
For the future, yes. For this season, maybe not, because McCormick proved to you for one season he's done what he hasn't been able to do with the rest of his career, which is hit for power, hit in clutch situations to get runs from third with less than 2 outs. But since he's gotten hurt, since Myers has come onto the scene, since he was looked upon by Dusty as a guy that he was going to expect to get time, he hasn't performed as well. But he's got experience enough with this team that says in the playoffs it's going to come down to a fourth outfielder and the possibility of a pinch runner. It's going to say more about your pitching staff than it is about your bench players. Dusty ideally would like to have Siri for his speed and his pinch running abilities no matter what, and have your fourth outfielder be McCormick. But if it comes down to one or the other, I think for this season, McCormick probably wins out over Siri.
I want to talk about some alternative ways in which they can use some of those bodies that they have in the logjam in the outfield. But before we do that, give us a word from Fitz Roofing.
Yeah, we love the people at Fitz Roofing. Look, they're great people doing great things for the city of Houston, Texas. If you need a roof repair or a new roof on your business or your house, you need home repairs done or a new fence in your yard, only one place to call. It's Fitz Roofing. Check them out, fitzroofing.com. Better yet, call them, 832-521-3001. You get a free, no obligation inspection just for picking up the phone. They come to you, they tell you what they can do. It costs you nothing. If they give you a good deal and you think you want to do it, make the appointment and realize before, during, and after the sale, nobody does it better than the good people at Fitz Roofing, making a difference one home at a time.
I heard something on the Rangers broadcast this week when they were talking about the Astros farm system considered, bare, and yet the Astros just keep bringing up guys that can rake, Taylor Jones and Robel Garcia notwithstanding. But what do you think, in your opinion, is the possibility that maybe some of these emerging bats could be flipped eventually, maybe next season or in the off season, to bring in some much needed pitching help on this team?
It depends, Brandon, because a lot has to still play out. You've got to see what happens with Verlander and Greinke. If they go, you've got a ton of money. If at least one of them wants to stay, you've got a dilemma on your hands. You've got 5 better than average pitchers under team control for the foreseeable future. So I believe that the rotation is in really good hands from an organizational standpoint. It's just if you're in a really good position from a team standpoint, when are you willing to pull the trigger and give up one or two of those guys to get an ace that takes you over the top and takes you to a place that you've been before that you'd like to get back to again? Those are questions for this team. The bullpen has to be completely evaluated again this offseason because of the moves you made at the trade deadline. A majority of those guys are going to be free agents at the end of the year. Therefore, you got to decide who we like enough to bring back and at what price, and then who can we get to fortify the rest of the bullpen so we don't run into the situation of the first half of this last season where the bullpen was a disaster. So there's a lot of question marks, and of course, we haven't even talked about Carlos Correa as it relates to James Click, the outfielders, the pitching staff, who to trade, who to keep. But at least they're in a better position they were at the start of the year when everybody thought a depleted farm system really left the Astros with very few options when it comes to the future. Now the future looks a lot brighter, not only for this playoff run, but also in the seasons to come.
So if they don't trade some of these guys and you still have that logjam out there in the outfield, we talked about in a couple of years, Brantley may be gone. He'll be at the end of his deal. Yuli is on that same time frame. He might be gone as well. Could you see a scenario in which maybe you do let a guy like Yuli walk, and then maybe they move Yordan into first, and so then it opens up a spot for one of those young outfielders?
I firmly believe that Yordan is the first baseman of this franchise for the future, but it starts after next season, and he has to want to play the position. You look at Big Papi, you look at different guys that played the position, but then actually transformed into designated hitters. Look, when you look at some of the guys, Nelson Cruz was an outfielder to start his career. He played first base the other night for the Rays. He's a designator by trade. As much as a year ago, you were having to consider maybe this is the end with Yuli because he had such a bad year. He's had such a good year this year, being in the top 5 in average in the American League, playing Gold Glove first base. I think what he's done, the Astros owe him at least one more year on a short-term contract to play one more season and see where he's at after that. But after one more year, when you really have to seriously dig down on the evaluation, that's where hopefully Yordan has taken an off-season and some maybe games here and there at first base to at least show you that from having the best bats in your lineup, he can take over when Yuli's ready to go or when you're ready to show him the door. And that at least you have that big bat in the lineup and a DH spot you can still use to fill with another offensive weapon.